Hello, and welcome back to a series that we've been doing since last July, once a month, where we teach on leadership or how leaders influence their local culture with various ministry approaches. And today's topic has to do with personality. We'll be defining personality, talking about it. I actually have a very interesting TED Talk. We're going to spend 15 minutes of our hour listening to Scott Schwefel in just a few minutes. I think you'll find it very interesting. I wanted to draw your attention to the handout. Mirabella sent the handout out a little while ago. And if you have not had a chance to go to the links and take at least the disc, I welcome you to go down here and start filling the little short survey out. All you do is read these 4 words that go across, circle the one that best describes you, and then add up the number of circled responses in the column. And that will give you the opportunity to participate more actively as we proceed through this presentation. So even in the beginning, even though I'm talking, go ahead and do that if you don't have your disc, 4-letter disc. And if you have both the 4-letter disc and the Myers-Briggs format, you'll be all ready for the next training. Because I'm ultimately going to show you how I use 2 differently designed, different profile formats to more fully understand what motivates people. And that's a big part of what leadership is all about. To introduce myself, for anyone that doesn't know me, I've been doing what I do for about 30 years now, married for 38, got married, went to graduate school, raised 3 now young men, and have been engaged in leading Eden Leaders Institute, of which this presentation is part, and Eden Counseling Center, which is our counseling center in Southeast Virginia, since 1995. So I'm excited to take you through the topic that actually got me into the study of psychology. I was always fascinated with understanding and predicting human behavior. So a little review. We did a training called Lead Like the Good Shepherd Part 1, and Forbes magazine had listed 4 significant roles of leaders, and I'll be reviewing this in the context of personality probably next month when we get together and do the second part of the personality training. So the ability to delegate and communicate, to create enthusiasm or motivation, and to hold people accountable and get jobs done. Those are 4 significant qualities of leaders, and you'll notice they're all relational. So we've spent some time looking at relational components in part 1, communication, conflict management, understanding yourself. And I'm going to come back to these elements and tie them into elements of personality theory. I don't know that I've shared my personal mission with y'all recently, at least. And so, to help you know who you truly are and live as if you truly believe is my personal mission statement. And personality theory I use always when consulting with people to help them come up with ways of thinking about themselves. And as leaders, we have to understand ourselves and those that we lead in order to be very effective. In John 10, we reviewed how often he relates to knowing his sheep. The Good Shepherd knows his sheep in John 10 and then other references. And then in John 21, Jesus passes on to Peter the office of pastor, referencing sheep again, using this metaphor, which was very common back then. And he intentionally says, feed my lambs, take care of my sheep, feed my sheep. And I think, the way I interpret that is he's saying there are young, there are older, they're not the same. Figure out what food they need, lead them effectively. That's what I take from this as he's passing on the mantle of pastor to Peter. So I think how we know ourselves, how we know others is very effective. One of the things that we talked about was that using the shepherd metaphor, you have defensive tools like the rod, and you have staff tools which are designed to protect. And too often leaders are seen as being either too harsh, too abrupt, too uncaring, and so the sheep sometimes feel like the rod has been taken to them. And we want to be sure that with our words, with the way we interact with people, that we are creating safe places for people to come to know Christ, to mature and develop. Whether you are in a pastoral role or a business role, this relates to how we lead those that follow. So just quick bullets regarding what we taught last time, and we will get that training up soon if it's not already on our website, if you want to review part 1 of Lead Like the Good Shepherd. So time, safe conversations, trust are necessary to know people, and personality theory helps me actually adjust the way I speak, the way I hear someone else, so that communication is more effective and we can really create this kind of safe place where people can know each other. So personality is a construct. It's an idea. Those of you that deal with ministry are used to this. Faith is a construct. It means that it's complex. It's made up of different parts, and we use the one word to communicate a very complex idea. So in my world, personality, emotion, intelligence, abilities, those are all constructs. And we create devices to measure them, such as the devices you all have taken, but they are imperfect. The ideas are always somewhat changing. As language changes, so do some of these ideas. So I just want to acknowledge that we're presenting one view of this, coming from the view of psychologists and personality. And I want us to hear from Scott Schwefel right now. So I'm going to set up the TED Talk. And for those of you that may not be familiar, TED Talks tend to be relatively brief, but a lot of information. Experts in the field who are good communicators, and that's what you're going to see here. In 15 minutes, you're going to see Scott Schwefel give us a really nice overview and introduce his approach, which will segue very nicely into our discussion of the DISC. That's what we're going to start with, the DISC. So again, you can be, if you've just joined us and didn't hear my opening line, on your handout, we have that Mirabella sent out, we have real short version of the DISC at the bottom. It's not as good as the one online, but if you'll follow those directions and complete that, what we do later will make much more sense, be a whole lot more fun. And Mirabella is reminding us that everybody should have that. That's awesome. Thank you, Mirabella. Give me just a second. I'm going to pull up the YouTube and make sure I have volume. And so Mirabella, you give me feedback if we're not doing well enough with this. This is Scott Schwefel and Your Personality and Your Brain.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Amanda, for that flight that we had and the authentic conversation. I'm here to talk with you about the brain science of communication as it relates to business on fire. You do in your business. What I want you to think about for a minute is, what does it take to do that? What will it take you to ignite your business? And to me, it's the science of communication, but really it's the science of self-awareness. How aware are you of what you're capable of doing? How well do you know yourself? How well do you know other people? It's about what you pay attention to. So what I want you to think about just for a second is a question you've answered a million times in your life. Who are you? In business, you probably talk about your role. Oh, I'm a painter. I'm a consultant. I'm a fireman, right? You might talk about a personal role, father, mother, sister. I'd like you to answer it a little bit differently, and to help you, I'll answer it a little bit differently. I'd like to answer it, if I can, with an alliterative adjective. A what? Alliterative adjective is just an adjective that starts with the same sound as your first name. My name is Scott. My adjective would be smiling. Smiling Scott. It could be standing Scott. It could be speaking Scott. You might be frustrated Frank, tired Tom, or because of the time, hungry Henrietta. Whatever it is, I'd like you to come up with it quickly and share it with people on your right and left. A one-word adjective that starts with the same sound as your first name and describes you right now. Come up with it quickly and share it. Go ahead.
Go ahead and do this if you're with somebody.
Okay. If you didn't come up with it, you can still work on it and come up with it over lunch and those authentic conversations that you have. But the reason I asked you to do it is it's probably something you didn't do yesterday or last week or last month. It's not a way that you typically answer the question, which means you had to think about it. You actually had to use your conscious brain to come alive, come aware, and come up with something new versus just a traditional or a typical answer that you gave. But what it leans into is, who do you think you really are? It's about self-perception. How well do you know yourself? How well do you How well do you come across to other people? And is it the same? I want you to think about when you first became aware, self-aware this morning. Probably for many of you looking in the mirror, brushing your teeth, you started to think about, who am I and how am I going to show up today? Who am I going to be today? As I interact with other people, I wonder what impact I'll have on them. Take a look at my slide, however. Sometimes we look in the mirror and the image we see of ourselves is not what the rest of the world sees. If I were to ask you again, in terms of just self-awareness, do you identify more with the kitten in this image, or do you identify more with the lion in this image? Where's my kittens in the group? Let me see. You just identify more with the kitten. Where's my lions in the group? Wow, look at the difference, okay? How do kittens vote? Yeah, right? No one wants to be the first or only kitten. Isn't that funny? Lions are right there. It's a difference in personality. What I want you to start to pay attention to is, what are those unique differences in terms of personality for you? What's this word, by the way? No, really everyone. What is this word? Silk. And what does a cow drink? Milk. So here's the thing, okay? Here's the thing. There's two parts of our brain, and my job is to slice yours in half today and help you realize that a big part of communication is driven by your subconscious. It's the part of your brain that loves to give you answers. It just gave you the answer milk. But it was the wrong answer, wasn't it? That's what your subconscious brain does frequently when you interact with other people. It makes assumptions and they're wrong and you roll with it. What I want you to do instead, like you just thought about the alliterative adjective, is I want you to turn your brains on. I want you to be conscious of yourself, more conscious of who you are and the impact that you're having on other people, right? A focus on awareness. Who are you really? How do you really show up and interact with other people? And it's got to start with knowing yourselves and then knowing the other person. Once you know who you are and how you're wired, you need to be consciously aware of what Carl Jung called the otherness of the other. Because if you're not, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Every one of us has millions of patterns in our subconscious brain that determine how we interact with other people. And if we don't challenge them through consciousness, stuff just happens to us. And we think it just happens over and over again and it's fate. We don't have control of it, but you do have control. Your conscious brain gives you the ability to change your outcomes based on changing patterns in your subconscious brain. How do we do that? We have a new thought. We have a new idea. We authentically steal ideas and pull them together. It's as reset, it's in your toolkit right now. You have the ability to have a new thought at any time about anything in your life you'd like to be different, and switching your brain on and having that thought creates a new pattern for you to hang on to. But it starts with knowing you and knowing others. So how have we done that over the years? How have people done that? Heraclitus came up with a model 2,500 years ago. It was very actively practiced, right, in actually modern medicine at the time. But for over 2,000 years, we tried to define people by type, by category. It's a way of knowing yourself, and it's a framework. So what we're talking about here is, with this conscious awareness, having a framework with which you know yourself, how you show up, and who you are, so that you can communicate and relate to others. That's what it's for. That's the power of it. So that's one model. There's so many others in the world, especially in terms of business and igniting your business or lighting a business on fire, helping people be more self-aware. How many of you have been through some of the models that are listed here? Millions and millions of people, most of you as well. The power of these models is helping you figure out, who am I? How am I wired? How do I communicate? Because that's how I judge everybody else in my world. If I'm 7 feet tall, you're all short. I walk into work every day and wonder why I work with so many short people, right? It's not about you being broken. It's about me needing a higher level of self-awareness. So how do I come up with that? Well, I want to share a model with you, one of many that are available in the world. And I'd just like you to think about it for a minute to help you categorize, how are you wired? What's that unique natural personality that you bring? Think about if it's more fiery red, you're determined, competitive, demanding. You love to get things done and you're task-oriented. You're always in go, go, go mode. Is that you? Does that resonate well? You're always about getting things done. My wife leads with high fiery red. For 27 years, when I'm driving the car and the light turns green, she says, go. Every single time. Go, turn left, turn right, go, go, go. That's high fiery red. You're all about getting stuff done. The shortcut is do it now. How about sunshine yellow? Does that resonate better with you? Energy, enthusiasm, karaoke night, happy hour, life of the party, right? If it's you, you're laughing out loud because you're seeing it in yourself. For all of you, in fact, right now, think about somebody you work with that's always telling you what they're doing, what they did the night before, what they had for lunch, what they're going to do in the afternoon, what they're going to do the next day, on and on and on. Think of someone specific. If you can't think of anybody, it's you. Okay? That's sunshine yellow energy. It's energy. It's enthusiasm. Try and make a decision for yourself right now. Are you more focused on red energy tasks, getting stuff done? Or do you tend to focus more on that yellow energy, all about people and relationships? Both are extroverted energies. Both are noisy and talk to think. Let me talk to the other two for a minute and actually try and calm down and slow down a little bit, right? To sort of talk in that preferred style. Some of you lead with earth green. You're amiable, patient, caring, relaxed. You're brilliant listeners. You listen to see where someone's going to take you without the need to interrupt in a fiery red way and get something done, or maybe the need to interrupt in a sunshine yellow way and make the story about you. The gift of brilliant listening for what's said and even what isn't said falls within that introverted feeling, amiable, caring, earth green. And the last one is introverted thinking, cool blue, analytical, cautious, precise. You want me to prove these concepts to you. You'd like to read more about them. You like to study. You like to analyze. And you like to go deeper. Think for a minute which one of these is more like you. And just share it with people on your right and left quickly. Which one do you think you lead with? Go ahead and tell them. Let me illustrate a point for you, because it speaks to the whole point that I'm trying to make, which is about awareness, about being conscious. Realize that if you lead with sunshine yellow, you quickly told everybody you could get to, right? With energy and with enthusiasm, and you're sad that I cut you off already. If you lead with red, you turn to someone and said, red. Why? Because it's like, now what? Let's get something done. Now I know this. Let's get something done. If you lead with earth green, you are probably a little bit slower and more cautious to lean to the right or to the left, to invite, the person to share in this information with you. If you lead with blue, you're not sure yet if that's the right answer because you want more time to think and be structured and be logical. But my point about communication is we need to know this about ourselves. We need to be self-aware because here's a risk. Here's a risk. What if you overuse these gifts of communications energies? What does it look like if you overuse them? My wife believes that she's determined, strong-willed, and purposeful when she tells me how to drive the car. I believe she's overusing that gift of red energy, and take a look. I believe she's aggressive, controlling, overbearing, and intolerant. It's my perception of the overuse of that energy. You can overuse all these energies, overuse that wonderful, caring earth green, and your docile, bland, plodding, reliant, and stubborn. Bad green, we call it. In fact, we like to say, hell hath no fury, like earth green energy scorned. Some of you who lead with that earth green, you recognize that, right? Overusing your cool blue, thinking too much about something and not wanting to commit to action. Analysis paralysis, it's also a risk. And of course, even sunshine yellow can be taken too far and moved to excitable, frantic, indiscreet, flamboyant, hasty, out of control. So the challenge here in terms of being self-aware is how do you know when you're using the gift of your personality up to the right level? And do you actually know when you've gone too far? What you may not realize is if you are interacting with someone who leads with your opposite energy, unfortunately, they tend to see you on this slide. Think about that for a minute. Your opposite energy, your opposite personality tends to perceive you in the negative and you don't even realize it's happening because you're actually in the middle of having your best day. It's why communication gets complicated. Oh no, that's not funny. Here's the funny part. If you've put yourself in one of these quadrants, put your spouse in another one. How many of you think you married your opposite type? Oh my gosh, what were you thinking? Opposites actually attract. They do. We're drawn to somebody who's very different than we are. We come together. It feels very whole and very complete. And we marry him and then we want to kill him for 40 years. Because they do everything differently than we do. I want you to think about that spouse when you go home tonight. Think about the energy that they lead with and treat them that way. Treat them the way that their energy might suggest. If you think they lead with earth green, give them a hug for a little longer than normal. If they lead with fiery red, go home and offer to do a job. If they lead with sunshine yellow, invite them to happy hour or go out with friends and have some fun. And if they lead with cool blue, send them a text or an email and invite them to do password or Sudoku at home tonight. Right? Meet their energy where it is. Think about where you are in the model. Think about energies that you lead with. Think about your family and your children. This is my family. My wife, I said, leads with fiery red. My youngest daughter, absolute fiery red, loves to focus and get things done. I lead with yellow. So does my oldest daughter. Look at her hat. Energy, enthusiasm, right? Mine appear disorganized. That's the risk of too much sunshine yellow. And look at my son. It's hard to see, but look closely. When we had this little exercise 10 years ago, he said quietly, "Can I wear more than one hat?" And my wife with high fiery red said, "What? No, pick a hat." And maybe in a moment, we became aware and said, "Connor, wear as many hats as you want." Look closely. He said, "I'm green, but I'm more blue." And he actually put 2 hats on. That's the uniqueness of personality. It's the way we gather information and the way we make decisions and how we show up in most everything we do. So be aware, right? The psychology underneath it is extroverts, introverts, thinking and feeling. The same psychology, Jungian psychology, that underpins Myers-Briggs or MBTI. All right, just a brilliant tool or tools and psychology that helps you access who you are, how you're wired, and what makes you tick. It's about being aware that this exists so that you can be aware of it in other people. I'll let you read this slide because this is going to happen as soon as we go to lunch. You're going to look at each other and you're going to see behaviors. Just read it for yourselves. I know it's crazy, right? But it's true. You do one of these things, don't you? And one of these things that other people does makes you crazy. They're probably your opposite type. Isn't it funny how we do it? I should probably have one more up there for the person who leans in, pretending to hit the open door button, but really hits the closed door. Maybe that's bad red. I don't know. The point behind what I'm saying is think about how you're wired and how you show up. In terms of igniting your business and having more success in that area, how might you contribute? Whatever role that you play. It's a function of your personality and where you fit in our model. And if you really want to kind of expand that impact, right, then think about in terms of leading others. How can you have a greater impact? Because there's a natural position you hold within models like this. You're naturally good at some things and you struggle harder with other things. Be aware. Be focused. Know yourself. Know yourself. Know other people. Pay attention to other people as you interact with them for the purpose of understanding who they are and how they're wired. Take action so that you can move forward, but recognize that when you're having trouble with someone else, here's a quote from Jung again, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a deeper understanding in ourselves. You've kind of heard that theme in some of the other speakers. If you're irritated by something someone else is doing, pause and reflect on why. All right, ask the question like Reese was saying. Why? Why is this happening? What's going on? Because very likely it's more about you than about someone else. So in wrapping up for you, pay attention. Be aware. Use your conscious brain to see who people really are. If you wonder what it feels like, pay attention to your blinking right now for just a second. Notice you're blinking? You're doing it. You're self-aware. It's that easy. Now, tomorrow morning when you're brushing your teeth and looking in the mirror, I hope you have a little moment of self-awareness again. I don't want you to think of me, but think about blinking. Look in the mirror and say, wow, I'm aware. I'm going to go be aware of everybody that I meet today. That's the plan. Focus on others. Know your unique personality style. Use whatever model helps you make sense of you in relationship to others, but notice the otherness of the other. Everyone in here is unique from everyone else. Everyone brings a gift. Everyone brings a unique personality, and they're dying for you to notice it. Just like you are dying to be communicated with in your preferred style, so is everybody else. Give them that gift, take action, and make a difference. Thank you very much.
Okay, that was Scott Schweffel. I hope you could hear him all right. I really enjoy that. I've heard that 4 times in the last 2 weeks, enjoyed it every time. We're going to get into what he calls red, yellow, blue, green, using the traditional DISC language. I'm going to teach on that very specifically. One of the things I really wanted us to hear is, as he says, sometimes you can be too much of you. You can be too much red or too much yellow. And one of the things that when I'm consulting with leaders who are transitioning or dealing with difficult issues, one of the things that they really need to develop is this kind of awareness. How do I lead people through transition? Because when they lead with just their own style, it doesn't click with, it doesn't connect with everybody else. And then sometimes relationships actually get harmed as people perceive intent from you that is different than what you intend to communicate. So it's very important. Funder's first law is great strengths are usually great weaknesses, and surprisingly often the opposite is true as well, illustrating these principles we're talking about. As we proceed, I want to draw your attention to the chat tool that's part of GoToMeeting. If you look at it, you'll see that Mirabelle and I were chatting through the video, and it's there for that very reason. You can comment either to an individual. You can comment to Mirabella by looking at the menu if you have a specific thing you want to direct to her attention. I'm going to try to monitor it while we talk, but I also have my phone here, and so if I need something needs to come to my attention, Mirabella will text me, and you may hear a little ding. But this content in particular, I welcome your observations, your applications, and I know that we're dealing with our audience is mostly Romanian, and so you got a Romanian form of the disc to fill out, which I, of course, can't read, so I don't know how it goes. So I know we're mixing cultures and languages, and just feel free to ask questions or comment as we go through this. I think it's very, very important. So we're coming at it from the perspective of a psychologist. That's my primary training and discipline. And the goals of psychology in general are to describe and define, and then once we've defined something, explain why it works so we can understand it. And then in the area of clinical and counseling and consultation and organizational psychology, the ability to anticipate what people will do, how they will react. And that allows us to present ourselves and our directives in such a way that they may be more likely to understand them, be motivated, and follow. And so we are able to influence. The outline that I took offline said was control as the fourth bullet, which sounds a little bit like it might be manipulative, so I put in the word influence. And when it comes to manipulation, psychological principles have absolutely been used to manipulate people throughout all of history. And I define manipulation as getting people to do something that is bad for them. So I'm manipulating you if I'm trying to get you to do something that is bad for you, or good for me, but maybe not as good for you. Whereas influence and leading like a good shepherd is to motivate, direct people to do something that is good for them, ultimately good for the kingdom. So some of the same tools can look like influence or manipulation, but the motives and the outcome are very different. And so I always use manipulation in that negative outcome kind of context. And then ultimately, psychology wants to improve people's lives. And so we're trying to bring some of this understanding to the principles of personality. And so this construct, you heard Scott Schweffer say, prediction of thinking, feeling, and behavior. That's the simple definition of this. And when I was a graduate, well, I was an undergraduate student, and I had some psychology courses. I began reading. There was very little Christian literature back then in the early 70s. So I was reading secular, historical figures in the disciplines, but I was fascinated with this understanding of personality, that you could actually think of a person a certain way, and that would give you some useful information about that. So this has been something that I've really been working on for a long, long time. And the tests that we're going to go through together, I've taken dozens of times, and I don't always come out the same. We'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes. So this is a little lengthier definition, and what I want to draw our attention to is this idea of the parts. Personality is a psychological system composed of a group of parts that interact and develop that impact a person's personal expression. So this comes from a personality psychologist, someone who actually that's his thing, personality theory. And so these parts encompass many different constructs. You see, it's all complex concepts, but Paul used the same kind of metaphor in his body of Christ. So, he writes that in Ephesians 4:11, he lists particular roles played by particular people, and then he also talks about the infrastructure. The whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. So, you can look at this many different ways. You can look at it, from a historical standpoint, the church developing over time. But I also look at it as a local group of people, congregation, team, ministry, business, that as each part, meaning individuals, does his or her work well, so does the whole thing grow. And then if we are dedicated, of course, to the cause of Christ, then we further the kingdom as well. So this is where I'm tracing back to some biblical reference that different people play different roles, and God has designed them and called them to those particular roles. And so one of the things that the DISC has been very effectively used for is selection of people when it comes to the delegation, that very important first role, delegation, who do you delegate to? How do you pick the person that you think should do this job well? And this model gives us one way of thinking about that. What will bring them the most joy? What will put them in the least stressful situation as they fulfill their mission in life? So there's a sequence. This is intent to show the sequence that's necessary for leaders to be effective when it comes to knowledge of self and others. And it begins with understanding ourselves. So we have to have some insight, some self-knowledge, so that we know how we are used by God, should be used by God, or what Scott Schweffer says, that negative part, when there's too much of us. And when I am indeed functioning in what he calls, what we'll in a minute call high D, too much, people find me overbearing, unflinching, stubborn, demanding, negative terms. And if we're paying attention and we are self-observant, we'll realize when that happens, we can dial it down. We can make some changes and adjustments. So knowledge of self and knowledge of others and how we interact with each other. That's the sequence. I know me, I know you. Now I'm also observing how we interact. And my role as a leader is to help you find your place and maximize your God-given gifts and talents and help you develop so that we have an efficient and good organization. And so the three things I'm going to end with in this training is how this affects selection, training, and motivation. So we're going to revisit those four things: motivation, delegation, selection, and we're going to tap into selection, training, and motivation as we wrap all this up. So you'll see how it really does fit into the leaders in the necessary skills for a leader to function well. So as we talk about the DISC, which is what we're going to start with, we are talking about normal personality. There is no good or bad, although some of you, because of your own type, will definitely have a preference, and some people you may see as preferred to be with than others. But really, God designed a wide range of peoples for specific purposes, and there's no greater or lesser than among the bunch. And so when we think of, where does it come from? We definitely believe that certain elements of personality you're born with, and the introversion-extroversion continuum. So the extreme extrovert, really outgoing, loves being with people, doesn't really even like to be alone, feels just meeting new people, never a stranger, always, just knows that people are going to want to talk to him or her, and they're going to love seeing the next person. And the extreme introvert prefers much more to be alone most of the time. So you have these extreme ends, and then you have different places on this line where you or I may be. I am much more introverted than extroverted, but I know how to function in a particular role and look like an extrovert. And that's necessary for leaders. You have to be able to engage people and figure out how to use the best of who you are to bring out the best of who they are. So we're not going to use this judgmentally at all. Now, we do know that personality can be changed by several things. For example, a person's propensity to be anxious or depressed also relates to personality. And we know that trauma can create long-standing realities in terms of negative emotions, negative thought expectations, and a person's personality can be changed by going through trauma. Cultural expectations shape trauma. In Asian cultures, there are many more compliant types than dynamic leader types. And that's in part, in my view, that you have very crowded cultural environments. You have people living in very close spaces, and they need to get along. And I believe the whole process of what we evangelicals call conversion, coming to know Christ, being changed through that relationship, I believe it can affect even basic personality elements. And I've seen this where people prone to real anger are much more calm and gentle. I have very good friends who have been, they're dynamic people. So when they were young, they were dynamic bad boys. They were doing stuff and causing trouble. And the Apostle Paul is an example. And if you were to meet some of them now, you would see them as the most congenial, most cooperative people you'd ever hope to know. So I believe that God can change things and make us into something new, but certain key core elements remain. So just a real quick history of the DISC. William Moulton Marston is the originator of a 4-trait personality type, which later evolved into what we call the disc. But he was more famous for creating a comic book character, Wonder Woman. So this guy was a psychologist, lawyer, inventor, PhD from Harvard, really smart guy. And he's influenced this whole personality thing hugely with the theory that he first developed. And so his view, and I've thought about this since preparing for this, kind of a different angle. He sees the four factors are: you are more or less powerful in the environment. In other words, you believe you have influence, you don't believe you have influence, and you see the environment as favorable or positive, which creates an optimistic perspective, or unfavorable, which means you're expecting conflict. And so this was his origin. And I think nobody's ever taught me this. I just came across this, and I think there's still relevance to his four models, but it really has changed quite a bit. And so now we have these four personality types. And if you took either you quickly filled out this one that we handed out, or you took the time to go online, you have four letters in a particular order going from the highest to the lowest based on your scores. And if you were tied, then they don't differentiate. And that can happen. I have tested people, they end up with all four tied. And so this is an example actually of an imperfect system where that could happen, where you just can't tell what's going on with that. But most people come out with one or two distinct pairs, usually one a little higher than the other. And so we talk of them as, for example, when I most recently took this, I came out DI, low S, some C. I think I'm realistically more of a DC, but I'm never high on S. I am too interested in change for that. So we're going to now talk about some of these elements. Let me look ahead here. Okay, I needed to orient myself. So the dominant individual in the old model, so I'm going back to the original model, sees self is able to influence the environment, and the environment is unfavorable. So the high D is willing to engage in conflict. The influencer sees self as also influencing the environment, but sees the environment as favorable. And this is the sunshine yellow, the optimistic, bright, cheery, effervescent kind of personality. The steadiness sees the environment as more powerful than the self, not expecting to change the environment, but that it's favorable. These are very peace-loving people. They like people to get along. They're fairly optimistic, and they don't like change. So that's what you'll see. You'll see that the D and the I, who see themselves as more powerful in the environment, they work for change. The S and the C don't like change. And so the C sees the environment as more powerful than self, and the environment is unfavorable. Therefore, they are expecting to have to work to attain a kind of happy state. So that's the old theory, and I think it still has relevance. The current test created by Walter Clark in '56, now we've jumped up, later refined in the '70s, is what we're looking at now. And so the dimensions are worded differently. Are you a task-oriented person or a people-oriented person? And so you can put it in four squares where you have task, people, and active and passive. And so each one of these captures two of these elements. The dominant driver, and I score almost always highest in that, task, focused, and active. And so this has implications for how we communicate, how we discuss things. And I would be interested if you would be willing to put your, this would actually be super helpful. If you would put in your chat your personality types and just let us look at them, we could actually tailor some of this discussion as to how it fits us, people sitting here in the room. So if you're a high D, put that in the chat. If you're a high I, high S, high C, I would really be interested to see how you all turned out, and that would shape. Thank you, Connie. Boom, she was right there with it. So if you would all do what Connie just did, that would be awesome. And then what I will do is I'll actually refer to some of these types, and you can kind of see if I'm able, even if we've never met, if I'm able to actually predict some of your reactions just based on this theory. That would be very illustrative. So dominant people are task-oriented and very active. They speak in bullets. They like things fast. Faster is better. Do. Build. Influencers are people and active. That's that sunshine yellow. And he he's doing this to illustrate the ever-moving mouth. Sunshine yellow people or influencers use a lot of words. Dominant drivers want fewer words. They really are different in how they communicate and their style of presenting. Influencers love to talk. They love to teach. They love to speak. And so you're tapping a real positive part of them when you invite them to present or that sort of thing. And many preachers are influencers. They talk. And you can tell an influencer versus a dominant driver preacher. If the service is an hour and there's a 20-minute slot for the presentation, the dominant driver preacher preaches 20 minutes. The influencer doesn't mind going on another half hour. There's just too much to say. So those are some differences you can see. Steadies, and my wife is a high steady. People directed, but less likely to try to create change. In fact, they like to keep things stable. So passive and active are not intended to be judgmental terms here. Although, like I said, a dominant driver values being active. So, I might have my own prejudice, but we're really trying to educate you so that you can see all people with great value. Thank you, Mirabella. Mirabella's an IDSC. That's why she was asking about the orange hat, because she sees herself as yellow and red in Scott Schweffel's model. And that I think really does describe her, given that I know her pretty well. Leaveview, IDCS. Thanks. And so just keep doing that, folks, as you're able to just kind of throw things out there, and that will help us, kind of craft this. So I'm always interested in well, thank you, Pat. So Pat says he's an INFJ previously, which could be any one of a couple types on the disc. And that's one of the things I want to show you when we get into this later, how they merge together. So conscientious people, the C's, are task-oriented and passive, and so they are very goal-directed. They don't try to seek change. They are the slowest to buy into change, but they are really careful people. That's where you get this conscientious. So they high value for accuracy. Well, I couldn't think there. High value for accuracy. Show me what is perfect. That's what I want to achieve. And so you'll see very different leadership styles. The S's and the C's, they will have thought through, probably tested things before they launch something. The D's and the I's, it's ready, fire, aim kind of thing. For those of you that have heard that term before, it's, we're just doing this. And so D's really believe, let's just get this started. If it makes a mess, we'll clean it up. No problem. Where the C's will say, I don't want any mess ever. So I'm not going to do things until I know it's going to work. And so in a healthy organization, you have these different dimensions, actually sometimes debating things like the timing of starting something, the resources necessary to start something. The D's and the I's are not careful with details. The D's and the I's are more likely to kind of envision what they want to see happen, and are highly motivated to get people to do it. The C's want to see things done right, and so you get this nice tension between the individual that says, we can't afford that. That your time estimation is way too quick on that one. Not going to happen. And so what we want to be able to do is have those discussions in a way that is healthy and positive rather than contentious or dismissive. One of the worst things you can do with an experience with an S or a C for UDs to treat them in a dismissive fashion, which you don't mind. If you're a high D, give me the facts. Boom. Yes, no, here we go. But if you're an S or a C, you're offended when someone doesn't take the time to hear you out. And so this is I'm sort of going through some examples of how this is useful. So looking quickly at at what we've got in there, we have 2 SCs, we have 2 IDs, we have 3 SCs. So that's interesting. So we have I'm a DI right now, and so I'm the only D that's chimed in. So let's just look at that. The SCs, so the steady conscious types, they're going to be people, since the S is first, people-oriented, friendly, likable. They're going to work for harmony. They're going to be able to understand your feelings and understand you. The S's, this is real important. The S's are the best listeners. They're the ones who they just tune in on what you are saying, whereas D's, their mind's kind of going all over. So they're kind of half listening, half thinking, and I's are mainly thinking about what they want to say. And then C's also can listen well. But they're more analytical, so they're kind of thinking about what you're saying, kind of thing. So the S's are the great listeners. So when you have an SC combination, you have someone who will really work to help sustain an organization. They provide a real bedrock kind of solidity when something needs to be sustained over time, like a community or a family or traditions. So SCs are the greatest keepers of family traditions of any of the groups. So I've got two IDs, and IDs are more verbal, and since they're ID, they're going to pursue leadership, and they're going to try to influence through persuasion. They're going to give their thoughts in such a way as to try to persuade people. The D's simply like people to obey, honestly. So they just want you to do what you tell them to do, and the S's influence through relationship development. The C's through practical analysis. They love facts. They love figures. They love tables. So the C will bring into a meeting all the tables and all the facts, and so they will try to persuade from that kind of factual basis. So that's a quick introduction to these various parts. And so what we would be lacking if the people that did put their personality types in, we have one D, which is all you need. We would have two I's, which is good, two S's. So we would need the people with the SC. If we were just the team that I'm looking at here, some of those SCs would need to function more in the C in order to have that element in our organization. That's how I look at this. What is your greatest skill? What is the need in the organization? How can we marry this up in such a way that everybody is as happy and stress-free as possible? I can function in other roles, but it wears me out. It really does. Tires me out. So these are some terms that are used to describe strengths, and I've put both the colors in the disc here to tie in, Scott Schweffel's lecture. So dominant or red, they're task and active. That's what we just covered. So they want to act, they want something to be done, and soon. So these are positive words used to describe them: direct, decisive, big picture, self-starter. That's D's. A lot of entrepreneurs are D's. They're willing to take a risk. D's are the highest risk takers. I's next in terms of these people. C's the lowest risk taker. So you can see these dimensions kind of playing out. The I's, or yellows, according to Scott, are people-focused and very active. So these positive terms, they're enthusiastic, they're talkative, they're emotional, they're very emotionally expressive, and they tend to be popular. They tend to be the kind of people that other people like to hang around. They're fun. They want to have fun. They know how to create context in which people have fun. So that's kind of where they're coming at. The steadies, or the green, earth green, as Scott Schweffel was saying, they're people-focused and passive, as we mentioned earlier. And so these are the terms that people use to describe them: listener, friendly, reliable, peaceable. My wife is an SI, with S being higher. And so she likes to master something, get really good at it, and just keep doing it. She feels good in that ability to do repetitive things well. I, as a dominant driver, as soon as I've mastered something, I'm bored with it. I'm ready for the next new thing. And so the way that's tied in well here at Eden is God has brought people together and given me a vision, and I can develop teams with a leader for the team, and then take my hands off and go on to the next thing, which keeps me happy, keeps my steadies happy, and that works well. Conscientious, or the cool blue, task directive, passive in the DISC model. They're very precise, very detail-oriented. You like them to be your financial officer, your surgeon for sure. When I go under surgery, I want to know that everything's right. So here's a true story. I was counseling or assessing, actually, a surgeon. He'd been in the field for 20 years, done thousands of surgeries. His expertise was right in here, fixing this part of the shoulder. Well, over 5 years, twice, he fixed the wrong shoulder, which is a big no-no. And so, the first time he had to do something. The second time they sent him to me and said, what's going on here? And so when we analyzed, I went through a lot of discussions with him about what was going on, and it turned out that both times he had made errors, requests had been made of him that he didn't like, but he complied anyway. So one time they changed the operating room on him, kind of last minute. We have to use this operating room, you get this one. And so what he failed to do was go through a very, very detailed pre-operation procedure. He's a high C, has to be perfect. And so when he told me how he prepared for an operation, I was like, I don't see how you messed up, man. You're very thorough. But my theory, and this is what I said to him, I think that when you were asked to make a change, it stressed you. He said, yeah, I was stressed. Okay, when we're stressed, and I explained to him some neurobiology, we don't think the same. And so people like me have to be extra careful when we're stressed, because my approach to stress is faster and harder rather than more detailed. And so we analyzed very carefully these two circumstances, and a request was made of him just prior to either setting up or even moving the setup. That's when the mistakes occurred. So what came out of this was, he said, well, I'm never, if they say we need to do this, I'm just saying I'm not doing it. I said, good for you. You will be protecting yourself and your patient. Knowing yourself, knowing how you function best, and in his case, taking the authority to make sure that those elements come together, comes out of this kind of understanding when it's used well. So those were the positive adjectives. So I really liked the way Scott Schweffel talked about the good red and the bad red. And I've actually taken his idea. So here's a project I'm working on. And if you want to join me, I'll be happy to share it with you. I've created an adjective checklist, sort of like this, only more complex, using the descriptors from Scott Schweffel's 2 charts. So there are 8 variables in this checklist. So you can be a good red or a bad red, or a good yellow or a bad yellow. And the way I'm using it is in organizations. I'm testing it right now. So where we're evaluating a leader and the perception of people about the leader, not just in terms of personality type, or do they perceive him as good or bad. I think it'll be really interesting. And if that interests you, just email either me or Mirabella. I can share it with you. We can talk about how to gather some information about this. So me, when I'm at my worst, impatient, insensitive, missing significant details sometimes, and pushy. Those are the kinds of words. So careless, for missing details, those kind of words. The I, the influencer, impulsive, lacking focus and follow through. You really don't. If you're a team leader and you've got somebody that needs to sustain something, you don't put an I in there. You put an S or a C there. Steadies, they're unassertive. They get too gentle. They sometimes need to assert themselves and have their voice heard. A good D like me will know who the S is and invite them to speak. Well, what do you think? Because they won't just throw it out there. They're often too unassuming, meaning they don't promote themselves enough. They may not be identified for some of their gifts because they don't promote it, and they're slow to adapt. And so sometimes a fast-paced leader will actually see them in a negative way because, hey, they're slowing me down. They're an anchor being dragged along the bottom. I'm trying to get this boat to go. The conscientious, in a negative way, again, slow to change. I think they're the slowest to change. And they sometimes are unwilling to negotiate. So that's what that should say. It should be they sometimes dig their heels in and they lock in and that's it. And when change occurs, they hold on to things the longest. So those are some negative. That's where Scott Schweffel is saying, well, if there's too much red or too much yellow, that's how other people will see you. You won't see yourself that way. That's his point. You have to get feedback from others. You have to have self-knowledge so you know when you are functioning the best way that you can for those around you. So what motivates a D? So if you have on your team a D, you motivate that D by giving challenges. This is a tough job, but you're the man or the woman for the job. With specific goals, here's what I want you to do. Clear results, a variety of activities, and very clear rewards. That's why entrepreneurs often are Ds. They're after a particular reward, particular vision. They don't mind the challenges, and they don't mind making some mistakes and having to change path, which Cs have a tough time with, just to contrast two very different personality types. So the way you speak, my point is the way you speak to someone affects their willingness to follow. So this was used very effectively on me a number of years ago. A friend of mine came to me and said, Paul, I have a big job for you. You're going to work really hard, but you'll love every minute, and it'll be really impactful in the conference that we're planning to have. Oh, I'm your man. I'll do it. He wanted me to be the worship leader in a good-sized conference. I went for it. Influencers. So let them speak. I mean, if they have the capacity and the skill, let them be ones to talk in public and present and teach and train. I rely on them for fun. I'll go to the influencers and say, how could we brighten this up a bit? What could we do that would be just more fun? And so you put them in a role where their spontaneity, these things can be used, their popularity. They make great assimilators. They greet people. People want to know them better. They bring them in. They're not sustainers, but they're real good starters for all these things. Whereas your steadies are your sustainers. So a job in which there can be peace. You don't want to put them in an overstressed situation or a high C. You want them to have some consistency and with people they can get along with. And honestly, high Ds are some of the hardest people for S's to get along with. They just don't like the directness. It just feels grating, all that intensity. And C's, give them the tables and numbers and charts. Count this, add this, tally this, research this. They love to research stuff. Go find me 10 ways to do this. They'll go out and so if you say to a C, I really need you to research this. I need you to come up with the best solution. Can you do that for me? Oh man, I'm your man. I'll put it together. So but they want to complete. Don't take stuff away from them until they're done. Oh man, they hate that. So let them finish. So as we're doing these talks, as I'm presenting these things, I'm curious as to whether if you're a SC, does this relate to you? If you're an IED, does this relate to you? And if yes or no, feel free to chat a little bit with us. Sometimes these things are, because we're taking short tests, sometimes they're not quite as accurate as a long test, particularly if you did this one. This is the one that I had is the shortest of the tests. And generally speaking, the longer an evaluation, the more thorough, the more likely it is to be accurate. So these are just, keep that in mind, that you may not quite see all this fitting you, and it could be that we took a too brief a test to capture your perspective. So we have a few minutes left. Let me see what I've got next. Okay, I can do this slide. So fears, this is real important. Dominance, hate to be taken advantage of, or the perception of being taken advantage of. As soon as they feel that someone's trying to get over on them, they'll get angry. And I've seen top leaders who are Ds inappropriately get intense because of the perception that someone's trying to get over. So I said they kind of expect obedience. So if you're not obedient, you're trying to get over. See how that could work with that? Influencers hate rejection. So they just want to be included. Hence they tend to work toward popularity. So the fear of rejection motivates them in a negative way. Steadies, they have to feel secure. And so you can see that those of you that know me and know my wife, if you look at these qualities, the two of us, and so I run the company, it's my vision, and it's changing all the time if you know us. And so she's like, whoa, this is too much, so it is kind of stressful to live with me. And the conscientious just hate criticism. And so when you see, you have a person that, boy, I didn't think it was that big a criticism, but they just really got prickly. That's probably a C. And so I actually word my criticisms very differently for each of these. So a high D, I just tell them the way it is. I try to always begin it with a praise sandwich. Here's how I value you. Here's what you did that needs changing. I believe you can do it. And it's just that quick with a D. Bam, bam, bam. Yep, let's go. Influencers, I have to, with the other three, it isn't just giving out information, it's dialogue. So the influencers, I try to craft it in such a way so that they accurately do not perceive that they're being rejected. And steadies, I try to promote how the change will actually lead to security, and with the conscientious ones, I really try to avoid criticism. I try to craft every communication. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but I will do a lot of preparation before the criticism and a lot of cleanup afterwards so that they don't feel insecure because they just view, if things not perfect, it's worthless. That's kind of the black and white thinking of a high C. So we're nearing the end of our time today. I'm going to continue with this next month. We're going to finish up with the DISC and move into a discussion of the Myers-Briggs. And so like we had Pat who chimed in that he's an INFJ. We'll talk about the INFJ. I typically score as an INTJ, but lately I've been an INTP. So I'm going to talk about this. And and they're built differently, and they're for different purposes. So the disc was actually initially designed for selection of staff, for hiring selection, that sort of thing. The Myers-Briggs to understand a person's subconscious motives. And so together, they're really, really powerful. And so I'm going to share that next time. I'll talk a little bit more about Becky and me. We're easy examples of different kinds of personalities and how we function together. And so we're going to get all these trainings up online, this one included. So if you know someone that might benefit from the next training, they'll be able to watch this in advance and be right up to speed. So I see that we're out of time. Thank you all for joining us. God bless you this month. I travel to California next week, so I'm looking forward to a little family time and fun. Whatever you're about, I pray that you're healthy and that you see God's hand in all things. So bless you all. Bye-bye. And you're all welcome that are saying thank you. Great to have you on board. Take care.